Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So today we're going to be slowly bringing back that League of Myths series, and we'll be doing several really crazy and interesting interactions with the newest champion coming to League of Legends very soon, Ivern. We'll be going through 12 different types of interactions, some a lot more interesting than others of course, but either way, if you guys end up enjoying this video and you want to see more like it for future champions and reworks, let me know by hitting that like button. This video will also be made in collaboration with another YouTuber by the name of Vandril. Some of you definitely may know that name. He has a great YouTube channel that I highly recommend checking out, where he constantly posts random footage of just really crazy and interesting interactions with different champions. So if this type of video is something you enjoy, then you will definitely enjoy his channel. I'll have a link to it down below. And also quick shoutouts to a viewer of mine by the name of Jethro, who made a very extensive post that sort of inspired the creation of this video. But without further ado, let's get right into the very first interaction or myth. So starting things off, what happens if two different Iverns, obviously being on different teams, try to take over the exact same jungle camp with their passive? So we start off with the allied Ivern marking the blue buff, and then the enemy Ivern is going to be trying to use his passive on it as well. So the first thing is the enemy Ivern can definitely retake over this buff and end up using it for himself, but the real question is what happens if the allied Ivern tries to go and take the buff right now, because you still see his green ring around the blue buff? Well, it so happens that even though you still see that green circle around it indicating that you should be able to just simply take it, you're actually unable to, and you have to essentially reapply your passive, because now you'll see both Iverns just reapplying their passive over and over and over. So this is definitely a visual bug, I would assume, because it shouldn't show the green circle around for your allied Ivern if you simply cannot take it and you have to reapply your passive. Moving on to the second interaction, what happens if Ivern ends up putting his bush underneath the tower? Will he still be seen? So in this case, it does seem like the tower will still have vision of him even though he's within that bush, and even though that bush didn't really have that exclamation mark on top of it. So not the best visual indication that the tower will be seeing you in that bush. I mean, technically you are invisible, but this is never an interaction we were able to test before, having a bush right beside a tower, so it will still have vision of you and it will still hit you. Something to keep in mind. So one of the more interesting things that Ivern brings to League of Legends that's pretty much a new mechanic is being able to transfer buffs over to allies, where Ivern gets it for himself and the ally can get it as well, so red buff or blue buff. And whenever it dies to Ivern's passive, it does leave that orb on the ground, which an ally can walk by and pick it up and also get that buff. But the question is, how long does that little spirit thing stay for? Well, based on this video and the testing, it does actually stay for exactly 1 minute, and after that, it will simply disappear. So not the most interesting interaction, but still something very important to keep in mind that you should definitely know about before Ivern hits the live servers. But here's a pretty interesting one. If by some random reason you have a Mordekaiser in your game and he gets the ghost of Ivern, he can actually command the ghost use its passive and slowly take over all of the jungle camps. Or in other words, you are essentially pretty much using one of his abilities as a ghost. Now this is not something that happens very frequently, and there are some very unique interactions with Mordekaiser's ultimate, but this one's gotta be one of the more interesting ones. So if you're ever playing Mordekaiser and you're facing this new champion once it hits the live servers, definitely something you want to keep in mind. But what about champions that have special interactions with bushes? I mean, do they still have those interactions with Ivern created bushes, and does it matter if they're on different teams? So here the allied Teemo obviously can use his allied Ivern's bushes to proc his passive and use it to its full potential, and in this example an allied Rengar is using an enemy Ivern's bushes to proc his passive, obviously working the way it's supposed to be intended and working just like any other bushes already created in Summoner's Rift. And as a note, this will also apply for other champions, for instance like Kha'Zix. Moving on to interaction number 6, Ivern's ultimate Daisy is actually able to be blood boiled by Nunu. You can see it goes from 0.8 to 1.07 attack speed once the blood boil does hit, obviously showing that it does work, but the interesting thing is the fact that this will make Daisy proc her third extra auto attack that has a little knockup much more frequently, and it's a pretty strong interaction. So in certain situations it could be more worthwhile blood boiling Daisy than an allied champion. Here's somewhat of an odd interaction. Now, whenever Ivern ends up using his passive on a camp and it's finally fully charged, if Syndra ends up using her W on that camp and taking one of the monsters away, it makes his passive act sort of wonky. So his passive here is ready to take the blue buff, and as Syndra takes the actual blue buff golem away, he right clicks on the camp, and you can see that the passive kind of recharged, but at the same time it also took the camp, and once Syndra throws a W away, it instantly takes the blue buff as well. Or here's another example with the raptors. Again, the passive is ready to go. Now right before he actually takes the camp, Syndra takes one of the smaller raptors away. Ivern then right clicks on the camp. He ends up taking it, this time without actually charging his passive once again, but when he goes to the final small raptor, in order to take that one, he actually does have to charge his passive, but it doesn't use any HP or mana. Interaction number 8, also one of the more interesting ones that I personally didn't even think of, but the interaction is crazy. His W, where he creates a bush, can be used to hide jungle monsters and even things like dragon. Now as you're gonna see through these examples, it does take a couple of seconds for the monster to actually fully be hidden within the bush, but once it is, I mean, you actually don't have vision of it, and you have to go inside the bush to truly check if it's there or not. So what if your team is doing dragon and everyone, including the dragon itself, is within the bush? The enemy team simply won't see you doing it unless they actually go into the bush and check, or at least that's what it seems like. And yes, this can even be used to hide Baron. I mean, a pretty damn interesting interaction, one that I'm sure you can really abuse in certain situations, but pretty damn cool regardless. Here's a very simple one, but also very important. Now, even though Ivern can't actually damage jungle monsters, he can use his Q. It'll essentially hit the target, and you can use it to dash over walls, making cool escapes, or just jungling faster, but your E ability will not do any damage whatsoever, and neither will your Q. But let's take a look at the Q once more, this time combined with his ultimate. Whenever Ivern summons Daisy, he can force her to attack a certain target by just simply landing the Q. You don't even have to use the second part of your Q. Daisy will automatically jump at that target and just pretty much go really ham on them. So if you ever need her to get on a target ASAP and just start doing as much damage as possible, this is definitely the best way to do it. So make sure you land those Qs whenever Daisy is up on the right target, or even on neutral or jungle monsters. Now, we already briefly talked about how Ivern is one of the best champions when it comes to offering buffs for yourself and also for your allies, but it doesn't mean that he has to be the one that actually kills the buff, because in this example, Shaco killed red buff, there was no Ivern passive on it whatsoever, but it still summoned the spirit, and they still were both able to get the red buff. And the exact same thing will apply to blue buff, but this just shows you the range at which you can be in order to actually take it very, very long, and it's probably one of the best and easiest ways to share these buffs. And the final interaction is working off number 11, showing you just how easy it is to give your mid laner, in this case, a buff. You can do this essentially from level 1 or level 2, and how far you can be away from the wall, so the mid laner doesn't have to do any damage, doesn't even have to go very far. It's just that easy. Alright guys, that is about it for this video. There you have it, 12 different and crazy interactions, some of them being absolutely insane and interesting. If you did enjoy this video, let me know by hitting that like button, and if you want more like this for all future champions and reworks. Big shout outs to Vanderol for being here and helping me out with this video. Definitely check out his channel down below. But I truly hope you guys enjoyed this video, and hope to see you for the next one. Peace.
Do you care if I care? Do you